In our last chapter, we talked about what mutual aid is, how it's different from charity, and why mutual aid and the ruling class are at odds with each other. But how many of our needs can we really meet through mutual aid? Are we limited to just sharing donations? Or can we organize larger infrastructure like water, medical care, housing, education, transportation, and energy too?
Do you think it's possible to meet big infrastructural needs like housing, energy, transportation, things like that, with mutual aid and without the state and capital?
Yes, but that system looks very different than the current one that relies on state and capital.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's how, plenty of people have lived for centuries.
With the way that mutual aid has been defanged and the way that sort of limits its scale and scope, no, I don't think that's gonna happen. And I think we need to start thinking seriously about the role of theft. Talk about Robin Hood or whatever, liberating resources. I don't think it's gonna be possible to scale this shit up in a way that is truly and completely divorced from these institutions without theft.
I think in order to meet our needs, without the state, and especially without capitalism, requires a lot of coalition building and just solidarity building and relationship building. Because when you're trying to build up a new system and create alternatives, and you're trying to do it without the power that's, being wielded against you, you gotta have some kind of power. And if that power is gonna be in people, you gotta actually have people.
In this chapter, the element of earth will help us take a practical look at how to grow projects with strong roots and fruit that can sustain us for the long haul. The groups we'll visit will demonstrate that effective projects are informed by local needs and capacity. Small projects can network and share resources over large areas. And through our networks, we can build infrastructures that outlast crisis points. But first, we'll take a brief look at some examples of entire societies meeting their needs more collectively and without a centralized state.
Woke up in the morning and I smelled the fresh pollution. Television never tried to show my execution.
Said, who's this? Just a kid from the neighborhood. I've been trying to start a revolution for the greater good.
It's the revolution coming, marching on your street. Always use your voice for the ones who cannot speak.
It's the ones who go to war from the belly of the beast. And I'm coming from the underground, you hear it in my speed. Yeah, bitty bitty boom boom, bitty bitty bang. It's the type of music that my people go and sing. Say bitty bitty boom boom, bitty bitty bang. It's the type of music that my people gon' sing.
Everyone kept telling me we don't do it, we can't do it. And I was like, that doesn't sound right. And it wasn't right. We can, we have, we did do it, and we can keep doing it. We just need to do it smartly and strategically. We know that basically the first human economic activity was cooperative. I usually refer to Chancellor Williams, an African-American historian, who one of his chapters in his book is about how the first economic systems in Africa were cooperative and collective. And in some ways, with capitalism, we became alienated from that. But there's just so much alienation that capitalism can do. It can't alienate us from our total humanness, and our humanness is about working together, solving problems together, and engaging in solidarity economics, so that we know when African peoples were then forcibly moved from the continent. They tried to make us slaves, but we were human beings. They couldn't totally take away that sense of mutual aid cooperation. And then our first mutual aid societies were actually for burial. The master, didn't care about how we were buried. But we did, because we still, we recognized how we had done it in Africa. We recognized that as human beings, we deserved to bury our dead in the way we wanted to, in a way that was affirming. And so then from there, mutual aid was used for everything. Sickness, widows and orphans, those retentions just couldn't be lost. And we just continued to practice them through the centuries, regardless of what situations we were in.
other groups start these types of projects?
Oh, definitely. See, when we have what we call survival workshops, we're not just sitting there talking all the time. What we're doing is we actually take the people into the community with us and let them see us giving away 5,000 bags of groceries and let them actually see the free shoes in the free shoe factory. This is what we call survival because it's real here. You know, it's not just talk. You see? So a lot of people can actually implement these programs and should.
What is the policy of the Black Panther Party? Because a lot of people don't know.
Policy, maybe you might be talking
maybe
about
that's the wrong
philosophy.
word. You know, philosophy.
Well, philosophy is basically what we call intercommunalism. We're not nationalists.
Right.
We don't believe in nationalism. Nationalism, or nationhood, you know, always hooked up with, is akin to superiority, is akin to racism. So understanding this, then we have an understanding of the economics of intercommunalism, which is based on redistribution of the wealth. And that's where you see the programs, the survival programs, becoming significant and redistributing the basic wealth to the poor and oppressed people of the world, you know.
The Black Panther Party gave us phrases like intercommunalism and survival pending revolution. These ideas and others are related to a concept some people call dual power, or the idea that we have to build a new world in the shell of the old. Before we have a revolution and topple the system, we have to build infrastructure that people can rely on right now, making capitalism obsolete. But how do we pursue a dual power strategy without just recreating the old system of power that we want to abolish?
There's a dominant conception of dual power that derives from the Russian Revolution, which is mostly the idea of creating a parallel power to contest the dominant power. The way that I talk about dual power and the way that a lot of autonomous movements talk about dual power gets more specific in the ethical position that whatever dual power we create, it cannot replicate the dominant world of domination. So it's not to create a parallel power to then take power and then repeat the same logic of domination onto others. Where we have a lot of power is in pulling away our desires from that world. With the dominant world's colonial structures, capitalist structures, those things that we desire, that we need to live a life, are taken from us, and we have to then participate in capitalism, for example, to purchase all of the things that we need that usually the earth can give us, and traditionally the earth has provided for us in community. So dual power, the way that I've seen it effectively be deployed is through movements like the Zapatistas that make it so that with the land that they have built their material needs for life, schools, clinics, their own justice system, their own economies. And in that way, that is resistance from being sucked back into the dominant power. The Zapatistas are a Maya indigenous rebel movement. They're not fully Maya, but they're almost exclusively Maya, which is really important to recognize because their movement pulls from enormous ancestral thought that has existed before colonialism and before capitalism in a way that has more balance with the earth. So then power, as we're talking about, like with domination is a high imbalance of energy on the earth. And so there's a lot of this indigenous cosmovision in terms of energies and balance and power that we get from the Zapatistas. They're in Chiapas, in the southern state of Mexico, on the border with Guatemala. And the world learned about them in 1994 when they rose up against the Mexican government, because the Mexican government was taking away communal lands in order to join the North American Free Trade Agreement with Canada and the United States. What's really interesting about the Zapatistas is that their original 6 founders were Marxist-Leninist, and they went in thinking that they were the vanguard, they were the elites, the intellectuals, the ones that had the recipe for revolution, and they were going to tell everybody what to do. But what was really fascinating is that when they got there, they saw the communities were already organized in a lot of ways, and so they humbled down and realized that they could learn from the communities and that the recipe doesn't come from one person, it comes from walking and asking questions and figuring it out with ethical principles, which is the key. The ethical principles are that glue. It's not something that's like the way we understand sovereignty The way that it's defined in the dominant modern sense is that one has control over territory, is the owner of territory, and Mother Earth is still property, is still the object. And to be sovereign, one then needs to get recognition from the interstate system or from the United Nations, so still from above. Whereas autonomy is completely being separate, autonomous from that world as much as one possibly can, because that world is so overwhelming in so many ways. But autonomy is that tendency, that pull, that project to create another world so that you don't need to interact with that one.
The importance of the movements like the Zapatistas that we're talking about is they're actually articulating this problem, that we want a more collectivist, a more solidarity economy. We're going to create it, but it's hard to do that in nation states where the nation states keep clamping down. The most important thing to understand about the nation state is that they were developed alongside capitalism, and nation states basically are designed to support private property and capital. Ultimately, if we have this new system of solidarity and, stewardship of the land rather than land ownership for private profit, right, then obviously the nation state should become obsolete if the processes were able to move in their own logic, right? Unfortunately, I suspect that the processes don't get to move in their own logic, since, as we said, we already know the people who are capitalists, especially because they have control of all the capital, they have more resources, so they can fight back and they can fight dirty, and that's what they've done all these years. That's why capitalism is still in power.
A lot of the times when people talk about anarchism, the response is like, it all sounds good, but it's not feasible. Like, people have a hard time grasping that organizing large societies is actually possible without the hierarchy of a central state. Rojava is one example that it actually is. There is like 2 million people there. There are small villages and large cities. And they were able to scale this direct democratic way of organizing the society. Rojava Kurdistan, or Western Kurdistan, is a region in the northeastern of Syria, and they're organizing their society in a manner of direct democracy based on ecology and women's rights. The Kurdish people within the Rojava region have been in a lot of crises, like fighting ISIS and fighting the force of the state from Assad. And the Turkish military pretty much continues its genocidal attempts to wiping out the entire Kurdish population. In their long history of a struggle for freedom, there have been numerous different attempts of creating these free societies for themselves. Rojava is one of the examples that they actually were able to gain autonomy and create a society with self-determination. One part of the structure of the autonomous regions is the decision-making body, the way that direct democracy is in practice is working in this large-scale society. They work with the delegate system, so each People's Assembly in each level send delegates to the higher level, and they come back with the decision-making and go. So this process of continuous participation in decision-making, it's actually happening, and people are dealing with all sorts of different problems. The day after the revolution, they started from the first thing that was the problem. Oh, we need to gather a few of us in the neighborhood and each neighborhood to deal with the trash. So they organize for what is actually happening, and it seems to be working still, even after like 14 years in that large region with like 2 million people. The other part and necessary part is their self-defense, and it's critical that they call it self-defense. It's not called the military or army, and the purpose is self-defense. And to have this democratic body of decision-making without the existence of armed forces that defends the society against other forms that try to dominate you, that is has been ISIS or the Syrian state, it wouldn't be possible. One of the pillars of the liberation movement is being anti-capitalist, and the way that people organize to meet their basic needs is through the creations of these cooperatives. Part of the reason for the civil war in Syria for it to begin was the problem of famine and the problem of water in that region. So the fact that they were able to come together through these cooperatives and share the existing resources, existing water, became actually a surviving strategy for them. And it's working much better than the central planning that existed. It's hard to imagine that how would you get from this society to a freer society. And examples like Zapatista and Rojava is actually grounding our work in real human experiences that have been able to achieve that. Not perfectly, obviously, but this idea that you want to live free, you have to practice for it. Where you are, how you are, with the existing people around you, and then you manifest that in the society that you make.
These examples show us that, although challenging, it is possible to meet our basic needs much more collectively. But they didn't just happen overnight. They were the result of generations of community organizing that started small and expanded as their needs grew. Many of us are organizing under the thumb of empire and capitalism, which can make this feel less possible.
What makes building physical infrastructure difficult? Like if you imagine like why we don't have our own space.
Shit.
Resources to share around, you know?
Yeah, I mean, capitalism. It's hard getting the resources to get the physical infrastructure, to get the money, and then at every step of the way, it's like there's gonna be obstacles.
A lot of red tape, roadblocks, rules.
Also just navigating conflict. Conflict is a really big one that I don't think we are, in leftist circles and in organizing circles, necessarily good at navigating. Time, everybody's time is limited. And so finding the time to put into projects and what time people actually have to sustain things, especially when they're long term, it's all limited.
Yeah, I do think it is more difficult to build physical infrastructure than to just engage in some of the more off the cuff, sharing the dog park type of things, partly because, at least within the United States right now, we're living in late stage capitalism. And so a lot of us don't have the money. I often joke that it's the same $7 being passed around from direct aid project to direct aid project. I also think that part of that is not just the financial aspects of capitalism, but also this idea that I have to have a permit, I have to have permission, I have to, we get caught up in these rules and forget that they exist in many ways to stop people from being empowered. So there's some psychological challenges that we need to, I think, support people in moving past.
As we've seen, a growing number of people are experimenting with mutual aid. So what kind of projects can we get plugged into today?
Can you list some different types of mutual aid efforts you see happening in North America right now?
All of the places where you can get free food. There's all the places where you can get free Narcan. In Ypsilanti, there's a house where you can just pull up and do your laundry and use the kitchen and and whatever.
Communal tool chests, not necessarily because of the philosophy, but economic necessity.
There are different street pantries that are around.
Street medics, refugee-focused mutual aid, rent help.
Eviction defense.
Pullover prevention, which is awesome because that is a free service that helps minorities not get pulled over because minorities seems to be targeted more.
For almost every basic need, there's a mutual aid effort figuring out how to meet it. We've seen tourniquet manufacturing, community water filtration systems, cooling and warming centers, gel support, land rematriation, DIY pharmaceutical production, and so much more. At the smallest scale, Effective projects are informed by local needs and capacity. The first project we'll visit in this chapter focuses on harm reduction, or providing supplies and support to people who use drugs to minimize risk.
Okay. Was go out in the shed.
We could, yeah. I mean, we got those shorts at our house this season, those shorts at our house this season.
So much harm has happened in this world in connection with drugs. And it's of my opinion that it's just like the war on drugs have convinced us to believe that all essentially stems from the drugs themselves.
Don't do drugs. If you're doing it, stop it.
And it's my belief that a lot of that harm actually stems from a very toxic relationship to drugs and is like very much a part of a neocolonial or imperialist project set out to decimate and otherwise commit genocide of like BIPOC indigenous communities. There's like many examples of this.
This is your brain on drugs.
What I would like to see is like harm reduction being grounded in like radical action and that historical analysis of like trying to challenge and undo those harms of the drug war.
This is the way it's been since she started smoking pot. She's all lazy and boring and, you know, we used to have so much fun together.
I think that like the stigma that people have about like drug users like don't care about themselves, they don't care about their friends, and like we see it played out often where the story is that like people who use drugs like are careless with their friends. Where like in my experience, like people do really deeply care about each other and they've found ways to like share both like the information and the care really profoundly, and whether that's been like just through like sharing information online or like creating drug users unions.
Costa got started as a grassroots like project or initiative. We offer what we call safe use supplies. So fentanyl test strips, wound care supplies, naloxone, which is the drug used to reverse opiate and or opioid overdoses.
We have a couple of different ways that we distribute. We have stationary exchange that's 1 day a week, and that's a couple of hours where people can come in and get supplies from us, and it's also a weekly like kit making party. I would say probably like the primary way that we distribute stuff is through our deliveries. For a while we were running 7 days a week delivery, and we're currently running a couple of days a week, like actually driving anywhere within like about a 15-mile radius of here.
It's like, so we'll go to apartment complexes, little tent encampments, hotels, motels, homes, and like the burbs or whatever. Is there one here or two?
There's just one here. It's
Okay.
two at the 6200 camp.
Okay. You know, we've went from like a pretty active membership of like a half a dozen people or maybe more from like 2020 to just like right now, you're going through like Tucson summer, which is like winter most other places where things like really slow down. You know, going from kind of like from that high to just like now just being like, okay, like what can just kind of like the two of us maintain and be sort of realistic.
Yeah, I feel like it's really hard to maintain doing the stuff that is like previously taken many volunteers when there's so few volunteers and right now so few dollars available.
For where we're at as a harm reduction initiative seems to be pretty much solely grant money. Like maybe there's this idea of trying to court like private donors or whatever, or get people to donate, but basically because this shit costs so much money, ultimately there's just like a supply and a daily need. There's just like our budget has to be quite high, and so it's just like whatever, right? So there's just like in my mind, we are a nonprofit in name only, to get grant money, to apply for those grants, because in theory we can do that, which none of us necessarily have experience in doing. It's our role to like get money and then just be like, okay, like what do you all need? And then like steward that money to buy the things that are needed and then figure out how to distribute them, right? And I think that that is very valuable.
And so I think that like that is why these programs are better than like some of like the, you know, capital H, capital R, harm reduction, whatever, because it's like actually flexible. It's like actually responding to things that are realistic to the way that people use drugs.
Just like you're empowering people to take the steps that they actually want to take for themselves and lead like lives of dignity. It's no surprise that that be a successful thing and have like real impact.
Okay, so I've got to drop off for this apartment building where I'm not going to go to their door. And so instead, we found like a location that's like near their building. Often we'll ask people for like a good stash spot and they'll like point us to whatever's going to make sense for them. And we try to like be in touch with them as much as we can to hope that it gets picked up by the person who's messaging us about it. So, yeah. See like these screenshots from like Google Maps where there's like circled and sometimes it'll have to be like a couple of pictures, like here's me walking up to the bush, here's it underneath the bush, like this is the parking lot it's situated in. With our budget being like pretty constricted like that, it feels hard to like re-deliver. If someone's like, oh, I went, you know, a day later and it wasn't there anymore, just it would suck to be like, fuck, like now I've got to like try to re-deliver and seeing it like dwindle. It's stressful to like manage like both like it's like super low barrier, like I don't even have to meet up with you, like you can give me like just instructions on where to stash it, like you don't even have to meet me, you don't even have to give me an address, like it could be like a public spot that I stash it. So having that like really low barrier, but then also like how to like try to ensure that it actually gets to the people who are asking for it, it's kind of a delicate balance doing those. Yeah.
People deserve, like, have a right to health and well-being and these resources and supplies, and it's our role to kind of do the admittedly painstaking work of getting that shit into the hands of the people. Like, I guess it's like when we're talking about drugs and like people who use drugs and like that sort of struggle. It's just like efforts of the state to have like dominion over our bodies, right? Is like one way, one thing in which you can distill it down to. And like this project is kind of saying like, no, no to that. All right, was that our last one for now?
No, there's one more in this apartment complex.
Oh, okay, cool.
And there's the two downtown over by.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I've been to this apartment complex before.
When our efforts are informed by local capacity, we can start to network our projects to share resources over larger regions. This is especially critical in disaster response. The state is reacting to climate crisis by militarizing the police and defunding programs like FEMA. Communities that have been made most vulnerable are left to figure out how to prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters on their own.
And who's the most vulnerable? Again, Black and brown people, low-income people, women, children. We're the first line of who's going down. And capitalism can't save us, even if it ends up saving the rich who can go off in their spaceships and find another planet or whatever, right? We're left, right? We're the ones left.
They're not coming to help you. They're going to help themselves. We save us. And we're going to do it together, because when you're by yourself, you are going to fail. You can prepare all day long, but eventually you're going to fail without other people. We have to stick together. We are going to die together, or we're going to thrive and survive together.
Western North Carolina, right outside of Asheville. Well, yesterday we had, I don't know, like maybe 30 gas tanks in the back of the trailer with like about 60 24 packs of water. And, you know, as we were on our way to like a distribution hub, you know, we passed through an affected area, a trailer park, and folks were outside. So we stopped and asked one person like, hey, do you have water? And by the time we even got to the distro hub, our trailer was like empty. So the need is really high, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, it's just a little bit tight. Do you have a hammer handy?
Mutual aid disaster relief is a people-powered disaster relief network based on the principles of solidarity, mutual aid, and autonomous direct action. And we work with communities, especially those most marginalized, to assist people in building their own recovery. We do this through a number of mutual aid survival programs, supplies distribution, rebuilding, debris cleanup, tarping roofs, and wellness services. And we also have a popular education component and try to educate and inspire people to be part of this movement. We have a solar trailer that can power people's ability to communicate with each other or medical devices. In Asheville, we're building out a mobile kitchen bus. Soon after Hurricane Maria, some of us organized trips down to Puerto Rico to support. And so we have a number of brigades to install solar in half a dozen mutual aid centers throughout the island. And then we also act as a clearinghouse of resources and information for the larger movement of autonomous disaster response and for mutual aid, of which we're only a small part. We see ourselves as kind of like a Swiss Army knife for the larger movement that can be picked up in times of crisis or disaster.
All the cross-pollination that happens in the Matter Network, it feels like it makes like everything possible. Today, I woke up and went to a hub where people that I really had never met opened their doors and loaded me up so that we could go and check in on elders that have been living in these hills their whole lives, you know. There's this trust in between the different groups that kind of work on the ground together that make up the larger body of what Matter is, right? Because there's no mutual aid disaster relief chapters. It's just everyone autonomously working and choosing to do that together because somebody in Michigan took the time to find out where there was a gas tank for us here in North Carolina. We were able to on the fly set one up, and that's because of like the foundational work that's been done to establish like not just the on the ground boots response, but also like an outlying network of support that is remote. It makes things that seem impossible, like taking 100 gallons of gas up a holler that hasn't been cleared yet, you know, or in a trailer park where half the residents don't have access to water or electricity yet. Something that feels impossible. It makes it very real and very accessible.
I got my start to disaster relief in New Orleans after Katrina. Similarly, when Superstorm Sandy hit New York and New Jersey, another people-powered disaster response arose. Again, it was one disaster specific. And so every time people would have to start from scratch, reinvent networks, fundraising. We realized that there's a lot of lessons learned of beautiful things to emulate and also dangerous things to avoid that we want to help, you know, make sure that future folks doing this type of work are aware of, and so that we can provide a level of continuity for the movement. It doesn't take away the need for local mutual aid groups to arise after a disaster and do their thing, but it complements them and is this national network that they can tap into for support and backup.
During disasters, different hubs pop up throughout the cities so that lots of people can drop off whatever supplies they have, and then people from the community come and pick up those supplies and take them out to other people, or they just come there to be able to pick up. What we try to do is like engage with those folks so that we can support the work that they're doing. Because I'm coming, from out of town, I have an end date to how long I'll be here. Because I have to leave again, and then other folks, there'll be a second wave that comes and helps as well. But because of that, I have like a different relationship with the community. And so that gives me the privilege of being able to say, I'm gonna drive an hour and a half away and pick up more gas, because I know that these folks that are driving into the hollers and know these people and have like interpersonal relationships and dynamics already, like they need gas to be able to get there. Someone that lives in the area and you understand the community, you're in trauma response yourself as well. Being able to be like, for a couple days, I don't have to worry about gassing up. Like that's gonna be accessible to me. I think that makes a big difference. It's made a big difference to me, when I was like the person from the community responding in a hurricane in Tampa, Florida, having access to gas or like water, or knowing that like I could feed my mom, and like that, that my family had access to food, like allowed me, when it was like my home, to be able to like continue working.
In marginalized communities, you might see somebody walking down the street with a chainsaw and they're going 5 houses down to help that older person get that tree off of them, check on them, make sure they're okay. They all know they're going to be the last one to get the resources. They know nobody's coming to save them, so they're going to get together and they're going to organize and they're going to help. That's real community, as opposed to living in a suburb where you don't know the person 2 doors down.
People spontaneously come together to meet their own and each other's needs from the bottom up after every crisis. The question isn't, is a bottom-up communal recovery effort going to happen? It is. The question is that going to be undermined by traditional relief organizations or FEMA or outside groups, or is it going to be supported? Too often, the nonprofit industrial complex undermines communal recovery efforts in favor of top-down relief efforts. Part of recovering from a crisis is being part of a communal recovery. And top-down institutions rob the people of that when they act in a command and control authoritarian model and define survivors' needs for them. One of the strengths of a movement-based model, of a network-based model of autonomous organizing, is we can be flexible and fluid and adaptive and be different in different circumstances. It doesn't take an umbrella group or a decision from a hierarchical institution to make something happen. Even the Department of Homeland Security, after Occupy Sandy, issued a report highlighting how a network-based model like Occupy Sandy, like mutual aid disaster relief, is actually more effective than the top-down command and control one.
Our mobile medic unit, it was just a van with some shelves, and then it was a van with some shelves and some over-the-counter meds and some wound care supplies. And then it had, herbal teas, and then it had all of a sudden an inversion chair so you could sit in it. And then all of a sudden there were kids' books so that you could sit and read kids' books and get your blood sugar checked and get your blood pressure checked. And it went from being just a van with some shelves to this own little organic, little micro community where you just park it on the side of the road, and then out of nowhere there's kids playing and someone's grandma's getting her blood pressure checked, and it's like you're sitting in a living room hanging out, but it's just out the back of a van out of nowhere. Matter feels like that. There's a lot of really small instances that just turn into bigger things. There's a lot of really brilliant, nurturing, and caring people that have really good ideas about how to prepare for climate disasters as they intensify, as people are forced to migrate and have no places to go. And I hope that we build infrastructure that is able to respond in the moment to people's needs, and in real tangible ways, like pumping gas into your car, cooking you a hot meal, checking your blood pressure, things that allow folks to feel when they're in these times where they're relying on their community to take a breath, that it becomes that the infrastructure we build ends up feeling like someone's living room, and that it's functional, but it's nurturing and loving, and that the hands that tend to it mirror that.
No matter what you see happening in the world, there is a place for you to plug into. Find your passion and get involved. And the most important thing you can do and a way you can plug in is be aware. Be aware of what can happen in your community and think of all the scenarios and possibilities of what you can do to help, and then start doing it. Get to know your freaking neighbors. Go knock on the doors. Know who's who and what's what and who might need what. If you have a skill set that can be used in any community, and trust me, everybody does, from sowing to planting to seed saving to building, go out and teach those skills. My hope is that these groups who are like-minded come together and says, hey, I have a community garden. Hey, I'm doing harm reduction. Hey, I've got herbal medicine. Hey, we've got some financial resources. When these groups come together and join forces, the government's going to be obsolete. We are a threat to them because we've learned we can take care of ourselves and our communities.
Through our networks, we can build infrastructure that outlasts crisis points. The more relationships we have before disaster strikes, the more we're able to share labor, skills, and resources when they're needed most. And the projects that sprout in crisis can grow into staples of our community, outliving the initial phases of disaster response.
The more you have grassroots co-ops interlocking with each other, so if you've got a worker co-op using a credit union for its finances, and then the credit union is helping to create affordable housing, and farm co-ops are doing the food supply along with the community land trust, right? And then the community land trusts are housing the affordable housing. The more you have people doing all this, the more you would have people then get engaged in civic action, political action. But it's got to come from the bottom up, because we've got to have those relationships with each other and with our communities that will protect us as capitalism tries to beat us down. To me, if you have the different levels of grassroots ownership and participation and stewardship interlocking with their neighbors' systems and creating local and provincial and then international federations, I think those could replace nation states.
The basis for that kind of work is land, first of all. Land is something that is not just a moral imperative for land back or just because people need land in the abstract sense. Land is the condition of possibility for survival as human beings. We're land-based animals. And the land is what allows the possibility for the creation of an autonomous world, of another world.
In 2017, when Hurricane Maria hit Borinquen, also known as Puerto Rico, centuries of colonization had already carved up the island's resources. As a colony, the people have been forced to be dependent on the U.S. for food, energy, and medicine. In the 2010s, the U.S. gutted Puerto Rico's social services in a process called austerity. Schools were closed while the power grid was sold off to a U.S. company. In the wake of Maria, colonial powers continued to exploit and neglect the people. It was the people who rescued each other, retaking abandoned buildings and forming a network of mutual aid centers across the island.
Aquí ha habido unos eventos tan fuertes los últimos 5 o 6 años. El huracán, la Ricky Renuncia, siempre lo traemos, ¿verdad? Una organización donde la gente sacó al gobernador en el 2019, los terremotos, luego la pandemia. Cada evento propició que las personas se dieran cuenta que el gobierno no tenía ningún plan ni ninguna intención de proteger a la gente, de entregar suministros, de velar por el bienestar de las personas. El cambio para el terremoto fue que cuando el gobierno abrió un centro para recibir suministros para llevar a la gente que vivió el terremoto, nadie fue para allá. Lo que pasó fue que en masa, montones de carros, familias del otro lado de la isla que no sufrió grandemente ese terremoto, se fueron a llevar ellos mismos los suministros a la gente del sur y suroeste. No confiaban para nada en que el gobierno iba a tener alguna respuesta. Para nosotros el objetivo de tener una respuesta que sea local y comunitaria al capitalismo del desastre es como la base para prepararnos y para estar en mejor posición siempre y crear nuevas instituciones que respondan, que sean de la gente, que la gente las pueda correr, que la gente las pueda montar en su espacio, que funcionen, que tú veas el resultado del esfuerzo que tú estás haciendo. Así que el apoyo mutuo como estrategia de vida, como es una estrategia de que esto me va a funcionar mejor, ha calado a mucha gente de esa forma.
El Centro de Apoyo Mutuo comienza en 2017, por lo menos este Centro de Apoyo Mutuo, un mes y medio después del paso del huracán María. Comienza aquí gracias al junte de 2 organizaciones que trabajan aquí en el casco urbano de Caguas desde mucho antes que Comedores Sociales. Creó las condiciones para que en 2017 ya haber una infraestructura aquí en el casco urbano. Nace como una respuesta comunitaria a las necesidades que habían, al abandono. Fue una respuesta mucho más rápida que la que dio el gobierno y sus instituciones. Hay una estructura que no había y las personas llegaban empezando por la luz, la energía solar. El centro empezó a funcionar con un sistema de energía solar que pues, permitía a las personas, que salvó vidas, porque en ese momento, en el contexto después de María, fue una necesidad que mucha gente tenía y que provocó, ¿verdad?, que personas murieran con sus medicinas, con sus máquinas para respirar, que no tenían dónde cargar sus equipos, dónde conectarlo. Entonces, aquí podían resolver esa necesidad. El recogido de agua también fue otro elemento bien clave. Murió gente porque no había agua potable en muchos lugares. La cocina comunitaria pues, estuvo disponible para toda la comunidad.
Nos comunicamos entre otros activistas y otras personas que nos conocemos de otras luchas anteriormente para que viniéramos acá a ver eso, ver si funcionaría en los pueblos que vivíamos cada cual. Eso fue un espacio que organizamos, el que pudiéramos llegar a Caguas, porque fue difícil llegar a Caguas, de distintos pueblos, a ver lo que estaba pasando, a coger nota, a crear las redes, sin decir que no existiera ya otra gente que estaba haciéndolo. Pero sí, la idea organizada de un espacio rescatado, sí para muchos de nosotros nació en este espacio.
At least 11 other communities across the island also set up centers to support their own people. Almost all the CAMs occupied school buildings that had been boarded up by the government just a few years before.
Pues este espacio nosotros, la comunidad, ¿verdad?, de Lares y de aquí del residencial Dr. Ensey, lo rescatamos en el 2018. Siempre puntualizamos que lo rescatamos por el asunto de que era un espacio que siempre ha pertenecido a la comunidad. Las escuelas pertenecen a las comunidades, pertenecen a los pueblos.
Al gobierno no le interesa lo de tantas escuelas cerradas. Debe dar la oportunidad a la gente que haga proyectos como lo estamos haciendo nosotros para ayudar a los demás. No es que estamos haciendo un proyecto para nosotros, sino es para la comunidad. ¿Ves?
Y este espacio estaba aquí abandonado ya desde varios años. Los salones, ¿verdad? Los salones
estaban sin ventanas, nada de esto, pues se tenía, todo estaba abierto como en aquella área, todo estaba abierto. Y yo me entusiasmé porque como estudié aquí, y era como mi casa, aquí estudié cuarto grado. Verlo abierto es un logro, de nuevo.
Lograr recuperar estos espacios es recuperar el territorio, ¿verdad? Como saben, nosotros siempre hablamos de que el asunto más importante es la tierra y territorio. Cuando hablamos de soberanía, estamos hablando de que las decisiones que tomamos es cómo nos desarrollamos económicamente ante un país colonial con tanta injusticia, con tantas leyes de austeridad, con la Junta de Control Fiscal y con todos esos asuntos que nos están reprimiendo cada vez más. Aquí nosotros recuperamos esto sin apoyo de ningún gobierno, ni el gobierno nacional, ni el gobierno estatal. Lo rescatamos con el esfuerzo de la comunidad y desde esa línea, reivindicando la soberanía y la soberanía agroecológica que lo trabajamos, que es nosotros decidir qué cultivamos, cómo lo cultivamos y cómo lo distribuimos.
También ocupar espacios que han sido abandonados o han estado en desuso y que la comunidad pues, se empodere a la hora de atender sus propias necesidades es medular en nuestros trabajos como centro de apoyo mutuo. El apoyo a la comunidad en cuanto a suministros y reconstrucción también fue una parte importante en un inicio. Darle ese apoyo a las personas que más necesitaban mano de obra, por ejemplo, en reconstruir techos, en instalación de sistemas de agua de lluvia, un poco siendo esto dirigido a la sostenibilidad de la comunidad.
La vida de los camps después del huracán María pues ha tenido varias fases. Al principio, ¿verdad? Pues se van creando estos distintos centros de apoyo mutuo a través de la isla y se hacen reuniones donde todos los camps, ¿verdad? Son invitados para tomar decisiones, pero también para intercambiar información sobre cuáles son las posibilidades de apoyarse. Poco a poco, cada camp, cada centro de apoyo mutuo se comienza a enfocar más en sus respectivas situaciones que requieren respuestas también muy específicas y no necesariamente son compartidas por todos los camps. No todos los camps necesariamente comparten la misma ideología política, no todos los camps comparten su misma forma de accionar, de ofrecer alternativas. Eso es uno de los retos que confrontó este proceso de los centros de apoyo mutuo. Aún así, esas relaciones permanecen, hay intercambios. Alrededor del 2020 hay como un nuevo auge, un nuevo apogeo entre algunas organizaciones, entre algunos camps, que desean establecer una coordinación sencilla. Tenemos unos valores compartidos, por ejemplo, no al asistencialismo, no al paternalismo, que son valores como muy coloniales.
Cambu pues participa como miembro de la red. La red de apoyo mutuo lo que quiere es colaborar entre los distintos proyectos para poco a poco ir practicando lo que podría ser en su momento un país autónomo, que no haya una dependencia del gobierno en ese sentido. Y básicamente es un poco ensayar, es como un ensayo de cómo quisiéramos relacionarnos como comunidades y como proyectos de base comunitaria.
Ponerlo en práctica es un reto, ir cambiando algo que es monótono, que la gente ya está acostumbrado a seguir ya ese patrón que tiene en el gobierno. El reto es cambiarlo, mejorar esa parte. En vez de ser jefe, pues no hay jefe. Podemos entre todos y todos. No hay un director, no son todos. Porque es mejor todos que uno solo. Y es más bonito cuando se comparte entre todos y todos, ¿sabes? Podemos dialogar, sobrellevar, no tener que estar esperando que llegue el jefe para hacer, no. Estamos y ahí vamos.
Los ricos tienen un pedazo menos de esta tierra que es nuestra. Esto es un ejemplo de que se pueden hacer ocupaciones de espacios abandonados en desuso y formalmente tener la titularidad y que sea nuestro para el resto de la existencia. Rescatado oficialmente este edificio y será de ahora en adelante el centro de apoyo mutuo.
Donde he nacido yo es Caribe que está allá, no solo playa y sol, un jardín florido de bonistas e intereses de un gobierno que se burla de esos muertos de su gente. Oh, say, can you see la ficticia estadidad, la cronología de eventos que ha traído la austeridad, indómita la montaña, la ruta de una memoria que es carne y cuerpo.
Si la comunidad sabe cuáles son sus necesidades, si la comunidad las vive día a día, pues por probabilidad va a saber cómo atender esas necesidades con mayor efectividad, con mayor precisión.
El centro ahora mismo ha seguido desarrollándose. La pandemia fue clave también en el formato de los servicios que se brindaba desde aquí, de esa mesa de comida caliente, pues pasó a ser un formato de distribución de compras o de cajas de alimentos.
Eso que está hablando él de compras solidarias, plantearnos cómo creamos un almacén de respuesta más preparado. Fue un proceso que se dio con otras comunidades que también se activaron durante la pandemia y que nosotros pudimos proveer comida y ellas se encargaban allá de distribuir porque conocían sus necesidades, así que fue un efecto multiplicador. Las compras se mantenían siendo un proyecto radical dentro de lo que, aparte de responder a una necesidad, cómo se transformaba a algo que organizara más gente.
Súper solidario, la cooperativa, proyecto del pueblo.
Después vino el Super Solidario Coop, que es la cooperativa de alimentos, que es como una continuidad al programa de compra solidaria, que fue esa respuesta rápida, ese relief en el momento de la pandemia, pero siempre, ¿verdad?, planteándonos como soluciones permanentes al problema y duraderas en el tiempo, que entonces era, vamos a canalizar este proceso que hubo con las compras en otro proyecto que dé permanencia y continuidad al proceso organizativo, que para nosotros es bien importante.
O sea, buscamos eliminar los intermediarios, que son las distribuidoras y eso, para ver si bajábamos los costos. Estamos, ¿verdad?, innovando cómo hacer una relación con la cooperativa entre los productores y las consumidoras que nos funcione y que sea justa y que nos traiga alimentos de calidad y buenos para nuestra salud. Lo que queremos que sea replicable también, que las otras comunidades puedan ver la posibilidad de organizarse como consumidoras, conscientes, con acción social, ¿verdad? Por eso tiene unos elementos el Super Solidario Coop que también ayuda a que la gente se involucre, que es lo más importante para nosotros en estos procesos.
Pues ahora mismo contamos con servicios de talleres de artes para los niños y la familia en general, talleres de diferentes cosas, porque debemos de educarnos y cosas que se beneficien la comunidad, tanto desde los chiquitos hasta los adultos.
Además también tenemos, en la actualidad tenemos accesible el internet, energía solar, para cuando pues la luz se vaya, la electricidad, eso pasa mucho aquí. Pues la comunidad tiene la oportunidad también pues, de guardar sus medicamentos, de darse sus terapias, de entretenerse un rato, cargar sus celulares, etcétera.
Queremos pues llegar más, poder tener más deporte, poder fortalecernos en los proyectos que ya tenemos, seguir añadiendo más cosas que la comunidad se pueda beneficiar, que les sirva de una manera u otra y que eso les ayude a ellos a tomar decisiones y que vean que sí se puede. Es duro, pero sí se puede.
Y eso es lo que reivindicamos en el Centro de Apoyo Mutuo. Cómo nosotros decidimos en colectivo organizarnos, qué vamos a hacer, cómo lo vamos a hacer, a quién va a beneficiar, con qué pensamiento, con qué ideología, desde qué perspectiva, desde qué manera queremos nosotros seguir construyendo.
Ahora estamos más fuertes. Ahora estamos más fuertes.
Sí, sí.
Tenemos más decisiones más ahí, que tenemos los ojos puestos en esas decisiones y así se va a hacer.
Estas luchas territoriales en los espacios donde están más marcadas, esas luchas, México, Brasil, muchos espacios que usualmente son las poblaciones originarias, ¿verdad?, que llevan esa bandera, es una autonomía de que hay autonomía, aquí nadie entra y son nuestras reglas, son nuestros acuerdos, pero un poco por ahí, ¿verdad? Pero nosotros pensamos que se puede traducir en autonomía de estos espacios, en seguridad y garantizar la permanencia de espacios como estos.
Together, we can blossom and transform our communities for the better. We have to take land back. We have to fight for it. When we withhold our labor and reclaim our resources, capitalism takes a hit. And when we fight together, the possibilities of what we can accomplish grow. There are more of us than there are of them.
The problem is, what do we do about state power, right? State military power, as well as the massing of capital they have. And that, I don't have a good answer. I don't know if the power of these local, regional, cooperative federations is going to be enough. If we want to be able to figure out another world and be in it, we're going to have to move toward the mutual aid, cooperative, solidarity economies. And we've got to have the courage to do it. We've got to have the sense of agency to do it. And we've got to work with other people, which is the whole point of all this, is about working with other people, right? We can't do it alone.
Right now, our mutual aid movements are cooking food and sharing it with people who are hungry. We're, tarping roofs or clearing debris after a hurricane. But in the future, we might be needing to build water purification infrastructure for whole communities or decommissioning nuclear power plants. Everything that we need, in the day-to-day, that we rely right now on capitalism or the state to do for us, we have to come up with ways to do that for ourselves and each other.
There are a lot of things that we can do to start building autonomy, because really in the end, it's about how we treat each other. I know autonomous movements that have land and they can't get the justice question right. We can get the community justice question right no matter where we are, as long as we're in community, right? As long as we have a community. So this work with mutual aid, I think that is really important. We will already have these practices and these logics that are now our instincts rather than capitalism, our instincts of care, our instincts of justice, of love, so that when there are openings for land, for example, then it'll be a lot easier to go there and really seize the moment and create something really beautiful.
La tierra de Borinquen, donde he nacido yo, es Caribe que está allá, no solo playa y sol, un jardín florido de bonistas e intereses, de un gobierno que se burla de esos muertos, de su gente. Oh, say, can you see? La ficticia estadidad, la cronología de eventos que ha traído la austeridad, indómita la montaña, la ruta de una memoria que es carne y cuerpo.